In this section, we'll be covering Pixel Persona. So far, I've been showing you Designer Persona, where we've been able to create with vector objects, vector items, and using all these tools that help us create those. So if we switch over to Pixel Persona, this is basically a dedicated workspace that allows you to work with raster or pixel-based graphics alongside your vector elements that you might have designed in Designer Persona. So Pixel Persona is particularly useful for when maybe editing a photo or retouching it, or maybe you want to paint in texture using all of these raster-based tools. So let's have a look around the UI and see what's different. So I'll just go up to Personas again, and I'll just click on Designer Persona so you can see the user interface as it is. And if I click on Pixel Persona, you can see that on the left-hand side in our tools panel, we have different tools. And all of these will be able to help us either create or edit our raster-based images. Let's have a brief look at the tools. So of course we have our move tool, and then we have all of these ones here. These are all basically selection tools, and they'll help you select parts of your image and either cut them up, copy them, or just paint with inside of them. So we have the rectangle marquee tool, we've got the elliptical one, we've got the freehand selection tool, which is basically known as the lasso tool in other programs. We've got selection brush, and we have the flood select tool. Moving down, we actually have a pixel tool here, and it's a pixel brush that allows you to paint individual pixels. We'll go into that later. We also have, of course, our paintbrush tool, and you see next to each of these is the shortcut, so this is B. And of course, underneath this, we have some tools that will allow us to manipulate whatever we have painted. So the erase brush, the flood fill tool, we've got dodge and burn, we've got the smudge tool, blur, and sharpen. And then we've got a color picker tool and a hand so we can move around our document. But if you have a trackpad, you can just go ahead and put 2 fingers on it and move it around like this. Okay, let's start by using the brush tool. So I'm going to head on over and click on that. You can click on B, the shortcut, on the keyboard. The next thing I'm going to want to do is choose a brush. So I'm going to head on over to the brushes tab and select one. Affinity does provide lots of different free brushes. I'm going to be using one of my ones for this example. So I'll select my brush, and now I'll go up to the color tab and choose my color. I'll choose some kind of blue color there. Before I go over and paint anything, I can look in the context toolbar and modify the brush size. So I'll just make that slightly bigger. So from this point, I can just start painting. So I'm going to click and drag down just to paint our first line. And notice how this assistant has popped up here. It says the assistant has added a new pixel layer and you're now painting on that new layer. I can press X on that and we'll just have a look at our layer. So I'm going to head on over to the layers tab and see what we've made. You can see it says pixel right next to it, and there's a little icon here that says it's a pixel layer. So unlike using the brush in Designer Persona, if I just click on V, the move tool, I cannot use the node tool because it's not available in here. So I can't manipulate this the same way I did before. Also, let's zoom in here, and you can see as we zoom in, it's just made of pixels. This is a raster-based brush, because we're in Pixel Persona. So there's many things you can do to it after you've painted, but for now you can see there's a bounding box around it. You can go ahead and rotate it like we did before with all the shapes in Designer Persona. You can drag this out and squeeze it out. You can do all those same things. Okay, let's go back to the brush and paint again, but let's choose a different color this time. So this time I'll choose some kind of orange color, and I will just go ahead and paint. So one of the things you'll notice, unlike Designer Persona, is actually all the layers that I've been painting on have been exactly the same layer. So each time I put the brush down on the canvas, it keeps adding to that same layer, as you can see here. So let me delete this layer and I'll show you how to add multiple pixel layers. So I'll just go back to blue brush and I'll just click once here. Okay, we have one pixel layer. Let's say I'm painting something and maybe I want to add a new layer that's just for orange. Well, you go down here underneath the layers panel and you see it says add pixel layer. If I click on that, we now have a new one. It's empty. I can go ahead and choose a different color. So I'll choose that orange color again. And now I can just paint. And now you can see they're 2 separate layers. I can hit the move tool, V, and I can move them around independently. So you can build up layers and get creative with that. Of course, you can change the blend mode over here as to how that layer reacts with the bottom layer. Okay, starting from afresh, let's look at some of the options in the context toolbar for the brush tool. So I'll leave it as default. I can just paint something like this. You can see we've got a new pixel layer. I'm going to go ahead and make a new pixel layer. So I'll click that. And now we'll go up and have a look at opacity. So this is what opacity does. Basically, it changes the transparency of your brush. So you can go ahead and click and drag out, and you can see it's looking lighter. That's because it's like 50% transparent. If I let go and I start painting again, I can start building it up so it's less transparent. So every time I take my finger off the trackpad and click again, it's building it up. And I can just keep doing that, and the lighter areas have more transparency, the darker areas have less transparency. So that's how opacity works. Let's create a new pixel layer. So I'm going to go down and click on Add Pixel Layer. And for this one, I'm just going to whack opacity back up. We're going to look at flow. I'm going to bring that down to, I don't know, like 30%. And when I start painting with this one, I'll just do the same movement again. It starts building up. So I don't have to take my finger off. It will gradually build it up to create less transparent portions of it. So that's how those two work, opacity and flow, because you'll probably be using that a lot, because in this, there's only a paintbrush tool and a pixel tool for you to actually start creating. And looking at the other options as we go along, we've got more. Basically, this is how your brush is set up, and you can change the size, the spacing, the accumulation. I wouldn't play around with this if you're first getting started. The next one is force pressure, and basically if we don't toggle that on and we just paint something out like that, you can see it's all the same thickness. If we click on it, it will basically change the pressure sensitivity. So I'm on a trackpad right now, but if you were using a graphics tablet, it might be slightly easier. You can lightly press as you're painting, and as you apply more pressure, it gets thicker and thinner. And also we can use a stabilizer on this brush, so you can just select that, maybe choose rope mode and increase the length. We can click and drag, and we can use this rope to help us achieve smoother lines. Also, we have this symmetry feature here. If I just check it on, this line appears, and it basically allows us to kind of mirror image whilst we paint. You see it's kind of copying what I'm doing both sides. So if I just click and drag around, it will copy what we're doing, okay? So you can also click on mirror, so it performs slightly differently. So I'll just delete that, and now I'll do it again. This is a kind of mirror image. And if I just delete that, you can see up here, it says symmetry 1. I can change that to like 2 or 3 or 4, anything we want really. So I could just start painting here. And you can create a mandala-like effect. And of course, we've got the blend modes like I showed you at the start. And the next one is wet edges. So let's go ahead and paint without wet edges first. So I'm just going to paint a layer there. And now I'm going to go over to wet edges and paint again. And basically you can see the inside, it looks kind of dry. And on the outside, it's a more saturated blue, making it kind of look wet. And the last one is basically you can only paint on areas that aren't transparent. So right now, if we look at our pixel layer, we have 2 paintbrushes. Obviously they are not transparent, but everything around it is. So if I select Protect Alpha, and let's say if I change a different color there, yeah, I'll choose a different color. And now I'll start painting. You can see I can start painting from here. And when I drag it over there, it only turns up on the area that isn't transparent. So you can kind of paint within your paintbrush. Now that we have a good understanding of the paintbrush tool, let's move down to some of these other tools. And these will help us either erase or smudge what we've already created here. So underneath we have the erase brush. Shortcut for this one is E. When I click on it, basically there's the brush. You can see it's slightly different to the one we were just using. You can use any of the brushes as an erase brush. So right now it's on basic, and I'm just going to switch over to it. Here's our basic set of brushes. If I click on, let's say this one, round brush, it's a completely hard brush, and I can just click and erase it like that. It's quite sharp, isn't it? So these are all presets, so I could go down to one that's a little bit softer maybe. So round soft brush. And in fact, I can increase the size of this. By the way, use the right bracket key or left bracket key to resize on the fly, much quicker and easier. So now if I just paint across, you can see it's a lot softer. That's because the hardness is down. You can go up to the context toolbar and you can change the hardness. So you decide how soft or hard you want it. So I could just drag it up a little bit more and make it slightly harder. And of course you can change the opacity as well. So I could just bring that down a little bit, and I could just slightly erase it, making it a little bit more transparent. And the more I click and I'm clicking off and clicking back on, the more it's kind of making our brush disappear. And like I said, we can use any brush on our eraser. So now I have my stipple brush, and you can see I can erase with this brush, so it kind of makes more sense that I would erase it like this if I've made a mistake. So you can use that too. Okay, let's switch on over to our layers panel and we'll play around with the next one, which is the flood fill tool. Shortcut is G. If you click on this, you can choose a color from the color tab and then you can just go down and just click once. And you can see it's tried to fill in inside of this circular brush stroke here. And if you click again, it just makes it more intense. Now the next couple, which is dodge and burn, I'm going to use them on a photo because I find they're better useful for that kind of scenario, but we can click on smudge. So obviously this one will allow us to smudge this brush a little bit. So wherever you click from and drag it out, it will smudge it across like that. And of course in the context toolbar, you can play around with all the settings and the strength, how much you want it to smudge like this. Okay, let's go down and try out the blur brush tool. And in fact, I'm just going to switch over to the basic brushes. And I will just start painting with it. So you can see it's kind of blurring it out here. And again, you can play around with the settings in the context toolbar. And the next option down there is the opposite, basically. It's a sharpen brush. Again, I will use this on the photo. And then finally, you have the color picker tool. And this is basically where you can just click it and you can choose a color. Let's say you have a few colors here, or maybe it's on your desktop somewhere. You can just sample a color. So let's say I want this color here. I'll just click once. You can see in the color tab, it's switched over to this color. And then if I grab my paintbrush tool and start painting, it will be that color.